to another episode of Mind Over Masculinity, where we deconstruct the outdated and rebuild the empowered. I'm your host Avik, and today's episode is especially for everyone out there grinding in the business, building empires from scratch, and quietly carrying the weight of being everywhere to everyone. Yeah, or maybe you can say everything to everyone. So we talk so much about the growth, grind culture, hustle, scale. But today we are going to explore something that most men don't plan for, which is the end game. Not the failure, not the burnout, but exist. I mean, uh, how they can exit that actually reward you for that everything that you have built. Right? So our guest today is someone I deeply admire. She's bold, she's brilliant, and she's changing the way small business owners think about the long-term value. So please welcome Stephanie Hayes. So welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Amazing. So, Stephanie, like before we start, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all the listeners. Dear listeners, Stephanie is the founder of Assets to Exit and a strategic powerhouse who helps entrepreneurs move from revenue to wealth through the asset based business design and exit planning. So, whether you are just starting out or deep into the journey and feeling a little lost in the grind, then this episode is your roadmap to clarity, purpose, and the peace of mind. So, wait, let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much. It's nice to see you.
Amazing. Yeah. So, Stephanie, I mean, uh, the exit. I mean, why do you think so many entrepreneurs, like especially men, delay thinking about the end game?
Well, there's kind of two reasons, right?
Okay.
First of all, I think a lot of small business owners don't even
Mhm.
realize that it's a possibility for them. They tend to think that
Okay.
exits are only for the big sort of Silicon Valley tech bros,
Mhm.
VC funded businesses. And a lot of small business owners, when they figure out that there's actually a market for a lot of different types of
Mhm.
businesses, this starts to change their perspective. And I think the
Yeah.
second reason is that they're so caught up in the day to day that
Mm.
um, it just doesn't become a priority until people are burned out or
Mm.
they've got to that point where they're having this existential crisis, which is kind of like, well, what happens when I'm
Mm.
too tired to do this anymore? And then they start to get panicked, right?
Yes. Yep. So, do you think that, I mean, it has to do with masculine identity, like being so tired to doing rather than designing?
No, I wouldn't say so, but I do think that
Mhm.
there's a pretty I wouldn't say it's masculinity. I would say that there's a lot of masculine energy, and both women and men can have masculine energy, right? And there's a lot of
Mm.
masculine energy behind the push, 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 hustle, hustle, hustle,
Yeah.
drive, 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 fight, fight, fight. It's that very like um it's almost like a confrontation
Mm.
based approach to doing business. And, in the last few years, I've sort of really learned a lot about feminine energy because I
Mm.
tend to have a lot of masculine energy myself. And this doesn't mean, there's a real difference between masculinity and femininity versus masculine energy and feminine energy. We both have both, right? So when a lot of business um, schools and traditional business education teaches us to have that real like competitive tact tactical focused approach to business, that's when you start
Mm.
to really like lean into your masculine energy and you get a lot of out of balance, right? And I think both men and women really would benefit from learning how to use feminine energy
Mm.
in business, right? And that doesn't
Mm.
mean you're feminine. It means that you're tapping into that balance. You're tapping into that other side of you that also uses a lot of intuition and uses a lot of like human side empathy and that kind of thing. And it can really round out your experience as a business owner.
Got it. And I mean, it's so common that especially for men to equate work with worth. But
Yes.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that kind of pressure. I mean, it's exhausting. I mean, yeah. So like we build and build without a blueprint for the stepping back. So yeah. And like you also talk about shifting from income to asset building. So that's a bigger, I mean, big mindset shift definitely. So how does that affect not just the business, but someone's mental health and day-to-day confidence? What do you say?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question because I think a lot of people get to this place of
Mhm.
burnout. And what burnout for me, like people often associate burnout with I worked too hard. And I think most of the time when people say they're burnt out, it's because they don't see the longer term strategy. They don't see what they're working towards because they haven't put that strategy together. And I think that when you start to think about what an exit looks like, even if it's not I'm going to sell my business and it's more like an operational exit or you change your role in the business, that gives all these business owners a renewed sense of energy inside their business. And so yes, you can burn yourself out from working too much and too hard and really fatiguing yourself. But I think a lot of times what people are really missing is that feeling like they're building something, feeling like there is an end game in mind, and that can work wonders in terms of how you're showing up with energy inside your business.
Yeah, exactly. And have you seen men struggle with the guilt or fear when they consider slowing down or maybe exiting, even when it's the smart move?
Yeah, it's more about like losing what you've attached your value to. So if I'm not working or I'm not building my business, what am I doing to be valuable? What am I doing to have influence or prestige or any sort of value inside
Mhm.
my life? And unfortunately, as you mentioned, a
Yeah.
lot of men derive their this is old stuff, right? Old patriarchal
Mm.
conditioning. A lot of men derive their value from what they can make, right? What their business is, what money they're making, like that sort of thing. So when we do post exit planning, which I insist that everyone does before we even go into an exit, that's
Mhm.
where you sort of figure out what's life going to look like when you get out of this business because there's so much value tied up in
Mm.
your own identity and your own worth within your business. And so
Yeah.
it's really important to go into an exit with a strong plan for what's going to happen when you get out of your business, what you're going to do with yourself, how you're going to, reconcile your your value
Mm.
position in the business. And some people are just like, yeah, no, bring it on. I'm good. Like I can't wait to have a rest. And for some other people, they really spin and they go into almost a depression when they come out of when they do finally exit. So it's so important to be ahead of that and to recognize just how impactful it can be on your own mental health.
Okay. Yeah. So like I mean like what to say? What are the early signs that a business owner might be stuck in stagnation even if the numbers look good?
Yeah, it's a good question, because a lot of people sort of lean on numbers as the indicator of success. But I think there are a lot of other things you can watch for, like what's the energy within your team? What's your turnover look like with your staff? Like your people will pick up on the the success or the energy of the business. And so if you're finding people are sort of leaving or lagging or what have you. I think if you have an indicator around innovation, I think that's another area that can kind of lack. Um, and so I think you have to watch for all of these quantitative and qualitative measures inside your business and really have a good sense of self awareness. Like business owners need to have strong self awareness because they just like their own mindset and the way they're showing up inside the business directly affects their business's success. So, if you're waking up with almost people wake up with almost a panic or like a sense of dread about facing another day working inside their business, I'd say that's a pretty good indicator that maybe it's time to
Mm.
look at something new or look at a new future for the business.
Understood. Yeah. So like, how do you guide someone who says like, uh, but I should be happy with where I am? So what is that?
Well, whenever I hear somebody say I should, it means I wish I didn't
Mhm.
have to, right? So that's a it's very externalized. That's
Uh,
very like trying to build your mindset from external conditions
mm,
is a recipe for disaster, right? So that
mm,
y- you have to be so clear on who
mm,
you are as an individual and what you need for yourself. I
mm,
interviewed a guy a couple of weeks ago on another podcast, and he said, the most important thing I did for myself as a business owner was I created my own personal 30-year plan. And
yeah.
I work towards that, and my business facilitates that. And if I'm in my business and it's no longer supporting my
Mm,
30-year personal 30-year plan, it's time
mm,
for me to consider something else. Right. And
mm,
so I think as business owners, we have to know ourselves and know what's really sort of motivating us and driving us.
mm,
And that way, when you hear something like that, "Oh, you should be happy with what you've got," you can have a clear indication to yourself why that's maybe not in alignment with, what you value.
mm. Got it. Yeah. Yeah. So lovely. I mean, that's silent suffering, right? I mean, you are doing well, but it doesn't feel like enough. I mean, that quite dissatisfaction is where burnout begins, and where obviously conversations like this become life changing. So yeah,
Yeah,
and
100%.
yeah. So like, do you think that exits have been so mythologized as something only for the tech bros or venture-backed startups?
Why do I think that is, or do I think that is?
Why?
Oh,
Yeah.
why? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's just not well understood, right? And I think you
Mhm.
hear a lot about it. Nobody
Mm.
First of all, most business owners haven't gone through, any sort of formal business education. They've kind of stepped in and started doing what they do and then built a business around that. So they
Mm.
don't have the benefit of having gone through some type of formal education that'll teach them about this as an
Mm.
option. But the second part of that is that the only time it's really talked about is when there's some big, crazy exit, some big, crazy win. And it's very intimidating for a lot of people because
Mm.
they're not familiar enough with it. That's what I've been trying to
Mm.
do with my Assets to Exits program is help, small business owners understand what an exit is all about and what it looks like, and that they can sell their business for
Yeah.
something. There's still value inside their business. So I think it's just really a lack of education. But I also think that just the way that the media and like, the only
Mm.
times you ever hear about it is when there's some big, massive win or some big, massive loss.
Mm. True. So, okay. And why do you say to not why, I mean, what will you say to a solo entrepreneur or maybe a coach who thinks their business isn't sellable?
I'm about to buy a coaching business, and it's just run by a solo entrepreneur. I did buy a coaching business that was run by a solo entrepreneur. So, it's every business has value. There is a question all the time around how can I sell something that has a personal brand? And
Mm.
it's a little more tricky for sure, but there is a strategy around that as well. And oftentimes when we're working with our clients, it's well in advance of when they actually want to sell. And so we have the time to start to neutralize a personal brand and shift that brand to something that isn't so dependent on an individual. But you can
Mm.
very easily buy a personal branded business. And, the one that I bought is we've been making that shift over the last 2 years so now the business has very little,
Mm.
reference to the original owner, and it's much more neutralized. So all of that is possible.
Got it. So, okay, and that idea that only flashy or funded companies are worthy of a big finish is toxic, right? I mean, what do you say?
Well, it's just not real, right? It's not true.
Mm,
And that's just a lack of education. It's surprisingly an area that very few
mm,
business owners really know about. But, certainly those are the big numbers, and I'm not suggesting that you're gonna somehow sell your business for, tens of millions of dollars if you're
mm,
not playing in that field, but you can sell and you can make an exit and you already have value inside the business even if you think that you don't.
mm. Okay. So, okay, I mean, definitely. It can mean building something that lives on without you as the center. I mean, yeah. So, like, you mentioned about, I mean, that you are the uh, acquisition entrepreneur path too, right? You are on this. So, what has that taught you about how men and women differently approach risk, value, or letting go?
Mm, that's another hour conversation. So I don't want to necessarily generalize, but I would say that it's not about how women and men naturally approach these things differently. It's so much about social conditioning. So,
Mhm,
the same way that women have a much more difficult time with selling, it's
mhm,
because we as a culture have taught each other that women are valued for being nice. And
mhm,
asking somebody for money is not nice, and so a lot of women feel very confronted by that. And I
mhm,
think it's the same, women are largely grossly underfunded in the venture capital world, but
mhm,
they tend to be so much more consistent in their performance and their profitability and what have you. But because they feel like they have to fight so much harder to get recognition and to be
mhm,
considered, serious as a business owner, I think that they tend to be more risk averse and they tend to be a little bit more thoughtful about the people in their business and so on and so forth. But that's like a wide generalization. I do
mhm,
know that there are a lot of men I've worked with who are also that. So, yes, there's definitely a difference in the way both men and women approach business, but that's so much a, a a product of our,
mhm,
cultural history and our socialization and all of that stuff versus sort of how we are naturally. Um, but women are great business owners because they tend to really rely on their intuition and they tend to be very thoughtful with people. And that's, one of your biggest assets inside any business. But, like I said, I've worked with a lot of men who are very much like that as well. So that's a whole hour-long
mhm.
conversation, like I said, but this I think
Yeah.
to your point, it's too, reductive to suggest that
Mhm,
all women are one way and all men are another way, but generally, I think women tend to be a little bit more cautious because they know they're under so much more scrutiny.
mhm. Understood. Yeah. Lovely. That's great. Amazing. And have you seen men get stuck in the legacy building, like over the self liberation?
Oh, sorry, over what? I missed that last part.
Uh, hi, hi, Stephanie. Yeah,
Are you there?
yeah, yeah. Am I audible?
Could you repeat the last question?
Okay, okay. I'm just saying. Have you seen men get stuck in the legacy building over self liberation?
Legacy building over self-liberation?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just having a hard time hearing you. Um, yeah, there's certainly people out there that, fall into the trap of the stereotypical kind of tech bro founder where it's very ego driven and,
Mm,
women do this too and men do this too, but that congratulations for being, this figurehead, right? Those guys tend to fizzle out pretty quickly, and it's actually very few of them that are successful. But the ones who are really thinking more about legacy, really thinking more about how they're going to create something that lasts and is sustainable, those are the guys who tend to be a little more humble and tend to, you know, focus more on the business as an entity as opposed to as an
Mm.
extension of them, right?
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Amazing. And so if a listener out there who is hearing this and feeling stuck, where's the best place to start shifting their mindset from revenue to wealth? What do you say?
You know, I actually think it's really useful to understand um, what buyers think of when they think of
Mhm.
buying a business,
Mm.
and if you can understand what, like, from the buy side, you
Mm.
can sort of back into what would be really important for you in your own business. That's what I try to teach my
Mm.
clients is let's talk about valuation and work backwards from there to figure out what your growth strategy is going to be about.
Mm.
So I would say, like, a really good book to read is Buy Then Build, and it's written by Walker Dieball, and it's really intended for people who are going to be investopreneurs who are going to
Mm.
buy a business to get started as entrepreneurs versus kind of build from scratch. But
Mm.
what I think is really helpful about it for someone who already owns a business is to understand what a buyer would be looking for. And even if you don't intend to sell ever, that gives you a good indication of what makes a business valuable, and
Mm.
you know you can work towards that. So you're focusing on creating an asset rather than just chasing income.
Mm. Correct. Lovely. And wow. I mean, and what's the one small question they can ask themselves this week to start moving in that direction?
What do I want?
Mm.
So come back to yourself first. What do you want? Don't build because someone is telling you to do it this way.
Mm.
Build because it's aligned with what you ultimately want and is going to make you feel good.
Lovely. Yeah. Amazing. Great. So great. I mean, that one step, that one question, that's the spark. I mean, and once you start thinking with the end in mind, not the end of effort, but the beginning of legacy. So one can definitely unlock a whole new level of leadership. So yeah, that's amazing. Great. So, Stephanie, thank you so much. And this wasn't just a kind of business conversation; it was, I'll say, a values conversation. And thank you so much for sharing this. And for everyone who is listening, if you have been pushing hard, head down, heart heavy, maybe it's time to look up, time to stop doing and start designing. Like, wealth is not just the money, it's the freedom, peace, and knowing you build something that matters and that you can walk away from it proud. So, Stephanie, like if someone wants to connect with you, what will be the best medium?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. And
Mhm.
you can find me on my website at stephaniehayes.biz.
Lovely, lovely. Great. So, dear listeners, with this hope, until next time, stay brave, stay honest, and remember that your worth is not tied to your hustle. So, this is your host, Avik, signing off. Thank you so much.